Hey, it's Brian Gabriel. Welcome to day 6 of the Liberty Reading Challenge. Today we have Murray Rothbard. I hope you're not depressed because we're talking about depression, and depression hurts. According to the Zoloft commercials, depression hurts. This is economic depression, which also hurts. The article is entitled Economic Depressions, Their Cause and Cure. So we're going to find out what causes them and how do we fix this. I think this article is very long, it's 15 pages, and it is by Murray Rothbard, who's he's the founder of the modern libertarian movement. He's just great. But this is a long article, but I think it just gives us a great sort of basic understanding of why we get into these kind of depressions and things. Well, typically, what do people say? They say, well, it's capitalism, it's the free market. It's failure of the free market. We need more government to regulate, more regulations. So what if we had 115 regulatory agencies in the world of finance before the financial crisis? You know, that 116th really would have pushed us over the edge. We need more regulation. It's a failure of the free market system. Well, of course it isn't. Rothbard says there's 3 basic problems with that. Number 1, equilibrium. Equilibrium is this general economic theory that the supply and demand always tends to be in equilibrium in the market. So the prices of products and also the factors that contribute to production are always tending towards some equilibrium point. So equilibrium is number 1. Number 2, for this forecasting breakdown, this general forecasting breakdown. You know, if you're an entrepreneur and you make a mistake and you try and capitalize on some market that doesn't exist or it's not as good as you thought it'd be, you might fail, and that's normal. It's just called bad forecasting on your part. But what about this? Why is it not only you that fails during an economic depression, but it's everybody, it seems like. It's so many different businesses at once. Why this sudden breakdown in entrepreneurial foresight? That's strange. And so point number 3 is these economic depressions really hit the capital goods industries, at least they hit them first, before the consumer goods industries. All right, so that's just a fact. I know the economic planners say, you know, spend more, we need to consume more and just spend more on consumption. But actually it's the production that actually gets hit first in a Great Depression. So what causes it? Well, so we'll look at 2 people very quickly, Ricardo and then Mises adds on to what Ricardo says. But Ricardo really tells us the culprit is banking. Banking causes this business cycle, and specifically central banking. I won't go into all these things he says, but you should definitely read the article for yourself. He says the banks happily begin to expand credit because the more they expend credit, the greater will be their profits. Well, so they have great incentive to do this, but what really enables them to you know, this uniform, not just one bank, but all the banks are expanding their credit, is due to the central bank enabling that uniform expansion. He said banks can only expand comfortably in unison when a central bank exists. It's only when central banking got established that the banks were able to expand for any length of time, and the familiar business cycle got underway in the modern world. So it's the central bank. He says it works like a cozy compulsory bank cartel to expand the bank's liabilities. So all these banks love that. That's Ricardo. That's before Mises. Now Mises adds on to that theory by explaining, I mean, things like time preferences, very important concept. You know, time preference is something that we should all know about. We all have time preference, right, for goods. We all prefer a good now compared to later. We want it now. We want our good now. We want our food now. We don't want to build our tractor for 100 years before we eat. We're hungry, so we need to eat. So we have time preference. But the more that you're willing to put into savings and therefore into production, whether you're building that tractor so you can, the whole purpose is so you can consume more goods in the future, you have a lower time preference then. It's a very good thing. It's very healthy to have a lower time preference. So Mises talks about time preference, And he says, on the free and unhampered market, the interest rate is determined purely by the time preferences of all the individuals that make up the market economy, instead of just interest rates being based on nothing, on what the central bank says it should be, because they're these great economic planners. In a word, it's bunk. It's bunk. Of course, the free market should determine the interest rates based on the time preferences of the people, of the consumers. And so why do depressions happen according to Mises? His theory of business cycle is that these artificially low interest rates cause businesses to artificially invest in producer goods instead of consumer goods. You know, goods that will actually, they're putting their money into production so that we can consume more in the future. But actually there's not enough savings to really sustain that. It's just credit. And as soon as the credit dries up and the banks stop lending the credit, depression, voila. And so you have the bust. The bust happens. You have the boom before with all that inflation, with all the credit, and then you have the bust when inevitably they have to stop this nonsense, at least for a while. And then you have economic depression. Prices of labor and raw materials they end up being too high to be profitable. And depression is actually very healthy. It's very healthy. It's a phase by which the market economy liquidates the unsound, uneconomic investments of the boom. And so it's just a great analysis by Mises and Ricardo. And Rothbard actually talks about the 1930s depression a little bit as well. But you can read all that for yourself. He blames both Hoover and FDR, which is great. Lots of blame. I love blaming presidents for things. Isn't that great? Ford is the only one. Ford escapes all the blame. Why do we don't blame Ford? I'm sure he was pretty bad too. But Rothbard ends off on this note. He says, the time is ripe for a rediscovery, a renaissance, of the Mises theory of the business cycle. It can come none too soon. If it ever does, the whole concept of a council of economic advisors would be swept away. We don't need these economic... The whole concept of these advisors that know how to plan the economy and know how to... we give them these godlike powers to fiddle with the interest rates. That should all be based on time preferences. So that's day 6 of our Liberty Reading Challenge, and I'll see you on day 7.